Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is look at kente cloth, and I'm sure all of you have at one point heard of kente cloth, but there's a lot of history to this, and I actually put up a short video about it in Blackboard, and it goes through, once again, it points out like the oral tradition of the people that we're talking about, I think, in the video. So there are three principal types of cloth that are woven, and they are usually worn for ceremonial occasions. And so we have a strip woven cloth, particularly known as kente, and then also worn are amulet laden cloth tunics called bat-arkari. And I'll show you an image of that in just a second. So some of these textiles are woven for specific occasions or to identify particular social roles. Often they are made in a hierarchical range of quality. Simple versions of kente, for example, are available to everyone who can afford them, while heavier, more elaborate, labor-intense, and costly kente, or even are or were reserved for Ghana kings and specific members of the royalty. Kente men typically wear huge cloths, 6 or 7 feet by 12 feet or 13 feet, toga fashion, without a belt or other fasteners, and with their right shoulder bare. Women wear 2 or more smaller fabrics, one a skirt wrapper worn these days with a blouse, a cover cloth or shawl, and often a cloth for tying a baby to its mother's back. The technique of strip weaving appears to have been introduced from the Western Sudan to Akan area during the 16th century, perhaps somewhat earlier by the Mandi Jula. Narrow strip weaving or horizontal looms on horizontal looms worked exclusively by men, and you see that in the video I put up, is widely distributed across West Africa, but it takes on a particular elaborate and complex form in Ghana, in Akan, and neighboring Iwi weavers, whose kente cloth is made from 2 or 4 inch strips sewn together salvage to salvage. Kente ranges from plain strip cloth weaving owned by most people, though an extensive hierarchy of the cloth, again, is there. So the color-rich fabric with complex geometric patterns and fine units. So the more complex and the heavier the cloth, again, the more expensive, so only the higher up in the society would be wearing it. Most kente alternate plain weaving and inlay design. There's more than 300 named patterns organized by checkerboards, step diamonds, and asymmetrical, sometimes in random composition. Iwi kente may also incorporate pictorial symbols such as drums, birds, human figures, and even letters. So this is kente, and with the strip weaving, and if you watch the video, it was explained that the gold in all the kente is supposed to symbolize gold, like real gold that was abundant in the area. And then there are other things that are symbolized that are shown at the end of that video. Then we have different kinds of cloth here. So this is stamping patterns. So this is another technique of making cloth. And then this is the one that we have our different embroidery on. So there's this whole tradition in this area of making this beautiful, beautiful kind of clothing and cloth. And as it says in the video, that really wearing this was supposed to be on a very special occasion, that it meant that you had accomplished something in life, or that you were higher up in rank in the civilization, that you were wearing a piece of one of these cloths, and it wasn't supposed to be thought of as an everyday normal thing that people would be wearing. So we also have, as they have more contact with Europeans, they start to incorporate and import European textiles such as brocades, velvets, and damasks. And they like these a lot. But then somewhere probably during the 19th century, they designed these appliques that I'm showing you here. And they're known as embroidered chiefs, cloths that were invented, and they were called the cloth of the great. And so then these were these little like squares and stuff are all individually done and sewn onto a tunic like this as an applique, embroidered motif. And then these cloths of the great were obviously worn on special occasions, showing royal power and responsibility and wealth. We also have in this area of Africa terracotta funerary sculptures. And as in the video I have you doing for your quiz, they have an interesting thing where they, of course, when they live in an area of the world that's so hot, when somebody dies, you need to bury the person right away. But then you may have actually like a second funeral for them when more people can come to partake in the ceremony. So that's what these heads are often used for. So the clay images include isolated heads, heads attached to rudimentary bodies, and heads attached to funerary vessels. And they often have royal context. These terracotta traditions go back at least to the 16th century. Royal terracotta images were occasionally adorned with fine cloth and seated in state on chairs for royal second burial ceremonies. So that's what I was just talking about. Surrounded by both terracotta and actual human attendants, the dressed sculptures were later paraded through the streets of the community to the royal graveyard in a festive procession, drawing crowds of people who shouted farewells to the departed. And again, this is because it takes a while for people to get to the location, but you need to bury these people right away because of the heat of the area. So these heads are rather generic. They really don't have much in the way of individual, things to identify them, such as scarification or hairstyle. And the Akan conventions of flattening the head, which is referred to as like really the refinement of beauty. You can really see it kind of in this area. We see that in some of these. We also have other things like the Akan deities that are carved out of wood, and then they're put in houses, and they're marks of the civilization of really trying to show the duality of, let's say, things such as kind and anger, generous and withholding. And then yet another kind of sculpture is small figures that are found in shrines, and these are actually some of the best known images in this part of Africa. And they're put in shrines to often help to have, for women to have healthy babies, is the idea that you put these in the shrines to guarantee that you're going to have a healthy child. So next we're looking at a pair of figures from what's known as the Bali group. And the Bali group is one of the largest groups in West Africa, and they have probably the most interesting form of government. They don't have a king. It's more like a centralized government where everyone has a say in the government. Which I find really fascinating. And I have a video up that runs through the idea of government and some of their art and a little bit of their history. Now the pair figure that I'm showing you here is a male and a female. Obviously, we can tell the difference. And the way they bend their knees and put their arms kind of in front of them is supposed to represent this idea of peace and a peaceful gesture for these figures. And it really is an interesting concept of how, like I said, they really organize their groups of people in these kinds of villages within these different then wards within the villages, and that there is no real leader. You know, how is this done? And yet they're very peaceful people. So very interesting. Please watch the video I have up.